We'll be getting started here in just another minute or two. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get things started. So this is our monthly new partner introduction. So this is sort of a high-level overview of who Zyxel is. We go over a very high-level overview of some of the different product offerings we have and maybe give you some tips and suggestions on how to sell those products or applications where you might be able to use those products. So we're going to start off today by going over a little bit about who Zyxel is. I'm fully aware that Zyxel is not a household name, although we have been doing this for over 30 years. So for over 30 years now, we have been making networking equipment. We got started all the way back in 1989. One of the reasons why we aren't a household name is our business was primarily aimed at the service provider or telco space. Um, so that's where our focus has been, particularly in North America, leading up to this. But if you're here because of our channel products or switches, firewalls, access points, things like that. So Zyxel Networks, we've deployed over 100 million devices in the field. We serve 150 different global markets, and we have over 700 employees globally. So Zyxel Networks is part of the Zyxel Group. So Zyxel Group is our parent company. So we are Zyxel Networks, and our focus is on basically consumer and SMB networking. Our sister company, Zyxel Communications, is who focuses on the telco space, making CPE and COE equipment for the telco space. And then we've got a number of other different companies that fit under the Zyxel group. MitraStar is our manufacturing arm. So they're the ones who have run our manufacturing facilities in Taiwan and in China. So as mentioned earlier, we are a global company. So for North America, that's the US and Canada, we are headquartered out of Anaheim, California. So that's going to be our warehouse. That is our tech support. So when you call in for tech support, provided it's during West Coast hours, you are talking to Zyxel employees based out of Anaheim, California. If you call in out of hours, you will probably end up dealing with one of our European tech support offices. And of course, we've got offices around the globe. The big market for Zyxel is in Europe. That's probably where we have the most market share and the most name recognition and where we do the bulk of our business. So our primary R&D facility is in Hsinchu, Taiwan. That's responsible for around 70% of our R&D resources. We do also have an R&D center in China and another R&D center in Germany. We used to have an R&D center in Santa Clara, California, but we've moved those resources to the other locations. So Zyxel was recognized by S&P as part of their Global Sustainability Yearbook for 2024. And one of the things we do a little bit differently, and we'll touch more on this when it comes to our security, is we like to partner with a lot of companies that are experts in their field and bring their expertise to our products. So some of the companies we have partnered with include Ekahau, Wirestorm, McAfee, Norton, Webroot, Bitdefender, etc. So that's it as far as the background on Zyxel goes. And I think I forgot to mention it, but if you do have questions, feel free to send them in using the Q&A portion of the Zoom interface. So I won't be able to talk to you if you raise your hand. I can't really see chat as I'm presenting, but I can see the Q&A. So any questions or comments, use Q&A to send them to me. So now we'll start talking about the Zyxel products, and I'm going to start by talking about Zyxel Nebula. And the reason I'm starting with Nebula is because Nebula is something that touches all of our main product categories. Nebula is part of our access points, it's part of our switching, and it's part of our security portfolio. So what is Nebula? So Nebula was the first full stack cloud solution aimed at the SMB space. So we were the first guys to bring cloud networking to the SMB space. When we launched all the way back in 2016, cloud networking was primarily part of the enterprise space, with, of course, the biggest player being Cisco's Meraki at that time. There were some SMB solutions out there, but they were generally focused on access points only, not the full stack, not being able to manage your switches and your firewall products. So if all of that I've said makes no sense to you, let me try to explain. Nebula is a cloud-hosted management platform. It allows you to manage your customers, their sites, and their products all through a single cloud instance. You simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in, and you have the ability to monitor, manage, and configure switches, access points, firewall products, our 4G LTE router, etc. So it gives you one place to do basically everything. So we'll go through some of the features here of it real quick. So the main idea behind Nebula and cloud networking is to take all of this stuff that you normally do when you're deploying and configuring a new customer's network. And what we try to do with the cloud is we try to reduce the amount of time and effort you have to put into it, reduce the number of things you have to buy and configure, and in general, streamline the whole process, saving you both time and money. So one of the key things here about Nebula, and one of our main differentiators between us and our competitors these days, other than how long we've been doing it, is the fact that Nebula is a free management platform. We do have optional licenses, which unlock some additional features, but the majority of our customers are using the free version of Nebula to manage their devices and their customers. So Nebula is free. There are no mandatory licenses required to use the product, and the core version of Nebula gives you the ability to manage an unlimited number of customers, an unlimited number of sites, an unlimited number of devices, and basically gives you full access to the core functionality of all of our different product lines. So one of the cool things you can do is you can start setting up your products without needing to unbox them. So at any point, you can log into Nebula, create a new customer, start creating a new site, and some of the general configuration can be done right there. Once you have ordered and received the product, most of the products have a QR code on the outside of the box. You simply scan that QR code with your mobile phone, add the device to your customer's site, and then you can start configuring it without needing to plug it in. And then once you get on site, you plug it in, it will reach out to the cloud, see you want to manage it in the cloud, and will automatically update the firmware and download the configuration that you've set up. So you can do basically all of your configuration before you even plug in the first device. And one of the nice things with this, it also means that when you're sending somebody out in the field, they don't need to be able to know how to configure it. They don't need to be able to directly access the product to set anything up. They simply need to know where it goes and how to plug it in. So with a combination of just the interface that we have and some of the wizards and stuff we've put together, we've made it really easy to get a very basic customer network up and running in just a few minutes. And since everything's done to the cloud, that means that basically anywhere you have access to an internet connection and a web browser, you have access to your customers and their networks. You don't need to worry about setting up VPNs for remote access, port forwards, anything like that. Just log in and there you go. And in order to use Nebula, there's no additional hardware or software required. There's no cloud keys. There's no software that needs to be installed on a server somewhere. None of that sort of thing. The actual agent that talks to the cloud is automatically built into our products. So there's nothing that needs to go between. There's no configuration that needs to be done to tell the devices they need to go out to the cloud. If you have decided that you want to manage those devices in the cloud, they will find that on their own and they will automatically put themselves into cloud managed mode. So some of the features that Nebula offers includes the ability to synchronize certain settings between different customers. So if you've got some certain settings that you do that all of your customers have and you need to change those for some reason, you can easily do that. You can create templates and synchronize settings between sites. We have our VPN orchestrator that makes it easy to automatically create site-to-site VPNs. We have the ability to clone switches, virtually stack switches, so you can configure ports across multiple switches at the same time. Um, Firmware updates can be scheduled, so the firmware updates when you want it to update, when it's most convenient for your customers. And as mentioned before, you don't do any configuration of the device itself. Everything is done through the cloud, and you don't need the device to be plugged in to start making those configuration changes. So back in the day when we first launched Nebula, we copied the Cisco Meraki method, where if you wanted to manage a device locally, you would buy Cisco product. If you wanted to manage a device in the cloud, you bought Meraki. So for us, it was you bought our standard products for standard management, you bought our Nebula products for cloud management. We have gotten away with that. So now all of our products are what we call Nebula Flex. And so what Nebula Flex means is you buy or resell one SKU, and that SKU can be managed the traditional way by directly accessing it through a web GUI or SSH or Telnet, or that same device can be managed in the cloud. You can do either or. So that way you can standardize certain models of hardware and use those for your customers, whether you're going to be using the cloud or not, to be able to manage them. So it's really easy. When you buy a device, it comes out of the box in standalone mode. If you want to manage it in the cloud, all you do is, like I said, you scan that QR code, assign the device to a customer, one of your customers, and a site. And within a few minutes, that device will automatically detect that you have added it to cloud management, and it will automatically reboot the device in cloud mode and download the configuration through the cloud. If at any point you want to remove this device from the cloud and you want to manage it locally again, you simply remove the device from the cloud inventory, and the device will automatically reboot and put itself back in standalone mode. Now, one key thing to point out here is the configurations are completely different between the new modes. So when you put it in cloud mode, it erases anything it has and downloads the configuration from the cloud that you've set up. And then when you put it back in standalone mode, it will clear out that cloud configuration and put itself back at default configuration. So something to keep in mind. Also, when you are looking at our price list or our products online, you will see some products labeled Nebula Flex and some products labeled Nebula Flex Pro. So in general, when you see Nebula Flex Pro, all that means is that device comes bundled with a 1-year Pro Pack license. So Pro Pack is one of those optional licenses that unlocks some additional features. And then when it comes to our wireless access points, we have three modes of management. We have the standalone mode, we have cloud management, but we also have local controller management. So any device, any access point that's labeled Nebula Flex Pro has three modes. So it can also be managed with the local controller. So just briefly here to touch on the licenses, by default, all of our products support Base Pack. So Base Pack is that free version of Nebula. And again, unlimited number of devices, unlimited number of customers, unlimited number of sites that you can manage using the free version of Nebula. Plus Pack is something we added a couple years ago, and it sort of adds a couple extra features in there for you. And it's designed specifically to compete with some of the low-end cloud offerings from like Netgear and stuff. So that's our Plus Pack. Pro Pack is what the majority of people who aren't using the free version use. And that's been designed from the ground up and been there since launch. And it unlocks a lot of features for those of you that are MSPs that are looking for some additional features. So some of the things that you get with ProPack include a year's worth of logs, including an audit log of who made changes and when. It gives you an unlimited number of admin accounts, things like that. So I do pretty much a monthly Nebula presentation. So if you want to go more in depth on this, join our Nebula presentation. And then we also have what's called the MSP pack. This is a license for admins that unlocks some additional features that makes it easier for you to manage a large number of customers and sites. So we'll hit some of the features here really quick that are part of Nebula. Single click mesh. Basically, all of our access points that work with Nebula also support our smart mesh functionality. So that way, if something happens to the wired connection and they lose internet connectivity, they can automatically put themselves in mesh mode and find a node that still has a functioning wired connection. You can also, of course, use this to deploy access points in places where you don't want to run Ethernet. Donald had a question here. So Donald Howard's question was, how do you sign up to try the MSP pack? So most licenses in Nebula, if you go into the licenses tab, there's an ability to turn on 30-day demos of all the various different license levels and things like that. I know MSP license didn't used to be part of that. I cannot remember off the top of my head if that has been added as something you can do yourself through the licenses tab. If it's not in there, what you need to do is you need to reach out to your salesperson. So Jacob, Andy, or David, and let them know you want to try out the MSP pack, and we can hook you up with a 30-day license key to test out the MSP features. So I hope that's that. Now I'll jump back here to the features here. So that's our mesh product. So that's built in as part of Nebula. We also offer the ability with our Pro Pack to use dynamic pre-shared key. So the standard way that you should be doing business Wi-Fi security is you should be using WPA Enterprise, which uses 8021X to authenticate your users. So each user has their own unique username and password. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like setting that up. It can be kind of buggy. It adds some extra steps in the configuration of your user's client devices. So unfortunately, a lot of businesses just end up using one pre-shared key, just like you would on your home network. And of course, the downsides of that is anytime you fire an employee, these still have access to your wireless network. Unless you want to change that pre-shared key for every employee there. So because of that, the security is not that great. So dynamic pre-shared key is a great way of basically offering that WPA enterprise type level of security, but making it a lot simpler for your users. So the way it works is you will have one SSID that all of your users will connect to, but each user gets their own unique pre-shared key. So it's not a username and password, it's just a password. They type it in just like they would when connecting to their home network or a hotspot or something like that. So they just enter the key and connect. And then on the back end, what happens is we take that key, we verify it against a user database, and verify that that user should be getting access, that key is valid, but it also includes VLAN information. So then you can assign that user to the appropriate VLAN for that user. So the great thing is It's simpler and easier to set up than standard WPA Enterprise, but still gives you the ability, basically, when you onboard a new employee, they get their own unique password. When somebody leaves the company, you simply deactivate their password, they lose access to the website or to the network. And then in addition, you can do VLAN, so you can, restrict what network resources those users have access to by assigning them a VLAN and setting up the VLAN access rules. Another feature that's part of ProPack is our AI and machine learning. So basically, with the wireless network, we've got some different settings that we can automatically tweak and adjust based on what we see as the real world behaviors of the client devices as they're connected to that wireless network. So it helps make things smoother for your users and requires less manual intervention and tweaking of the wireless network. Okay, moving on from Nebula, we're going to start talking about our wireless access points because that's the product I'm responsible for. Um, and I know it better than some of the other products. So we'll start talking about that. Now, one of the key things I like to point out is how we build our access points. We build them very differently than our competition, even our more expensive competition that's out there. So one of the things you will see if you buy one of our access points and you hold it and you hold one of our competitors, doesn't matter if it's an inexpensive TP-Link or Ubiquiti or an expensive Cisco or Ruckus, you will find our access points weigh a lot more. So why is that? So access points are solid state technology, and there's basically two causes of failure. The first major cause of failure is capacitor failure. They're generally little tube-shaped devices that are filled up with electrolyte, and they have a tendency to dry out, leak, boil over, off gas, things like that. So in our access points, we do not use any electrolytic capacitors. We only use solid state capacitors. And now going on to why they weigh more, the other leading cause of failure in a solid state device is heat fatigue. You will notice some of our competitors whose access points only come with a 1 year or 2 year warranty don't have any vent holes in their housing. And that's why they offer such a short warranty, is because heat fatigue tends to kill those devices after a short period of time, especially if you're, mounting them in a plenum space or up high in an unair conditioned warehouse or something like that. So for us, we have decided to tackle that, and that's why we offer lifetime warranties on even our cheap $100 access points. Is we are built in heat sinks into all of our access points that are designed to draw that heat off of the board, off of the components, and then we will have a bunch of vent holes in the top of the access point to vent the heat out. So that's something you will see that's different in us, and that's part of the reason why our access points weigh more. The other reason our access points weigh more is something that we call RF first engineering, and basically it has to do with how we've constructed our access points. So one of the things you will find if you open us up and open up our competition is we have a lot more shielding on the board than most of our competition offers. And that provides better EMI shielding. It also offers shielding from neighboring 4G and 5G RF signals, which can bleed over into the Wi-Fi space when you're deploying in a building that uses DAS to distribute cellular signals inside the building. So that adds a little extra to the weight. And then the other reason is we don't attach our antennas directly to the PCBA. We mount our antennas on their own separate board that's separate from the main PCBA. And in most models, we will also have a metal RF shield that goes between the main board and that antenna board. And what that does is that provides greater isolation of those antennas for receiving the signal. It doesn't make a lot of difference when you're dealing with a strong, good connection, but it makes a lot of difference for those marginal users where the RF signal is barely making it back to the access point. That little extra isolation that we offer by doing this is the difference between a really frustrating connection that barely works and a connection that's slow, but is very reliable and consistent. So one of the other things that we do differently than our competition is we offer 3 different types of antenna. Most of our competition, including the big boys out there, generally only offer static antennas. So basically you buy the access point and it has an antenna pattern that's usually optimized with the assumption that you're going to mount these access points on a ceiling above the area to be covered. So we offer that as well. But we also offer what we call dual optimized antennas, and we also offer smart antennas. So I'm going to talk about those really quick here on a couple of slides. So as I was mentioning before, your typical access point is designed to be mounted on the ceiling above the area where coverage is. So basically the signal radiates out in a slightly downward circular pattern. It's often called umbrella coverage. And it works great provided that's where you're mounting the access point. But as someone who's been doing this for over 20 years, I know out there, it's very common for whatever reason you can't mount it on the ceiling, you end up mounting it on the wall. And the challenge is when you do that, the antenna pattern again is optimized for ceiling. So you've rotated the access point 90 degrees. So now you're sending a lot of your signal up into the ceiling and down into the floor, or it's being lost, or depending on building materials in a multi-floor building, you may end up in situations where you're causing interference for those users above and below you. In fact, we've recently been dealing with a customer who deployed a MXU deployment where they did just that. They mounted the access points directly above each other on every floor, and they're getting interference issues. So with a dual optimized antenna, when you do this, we have the ability to switch to a second set of antennas that are optimized for placement when you mount an access point on the wall. So that's software selectable. You can basically tell the device based on where you've installed it to use a ceiling antenna or to use the wall antenna. The other technology we have is called smart antenna technology. Unfortunately, we haven't given it a really trendy trademark name. So there are some other vendors claiming smart antenna, but it's usually not the same thing. This is closest for those of you that have sold other brands of products to Ruckus's BeamFlex Plus, or I think it's BeamFlex Plus or Pro, I forget now. Their technology. It's basically a very similar implementation and a very similar idea. So basically, I'm going to skip through this animation real quick. The idea behind it is that instead of having one antenna, or one antenna pattern like your traditional access point, or two different sets of antenna patterns like our dual optimized, we have hundreds of different antenna patterns. And instead of needing to manually choose which one to use, we have an algorithm which automatically chooses the best antenna pattern for each client that is connected to that access point. One of the nice things about the algorithm that we have that's a little bit nicer than some of the others out there is our algorithm not only takes into account where the client device is in relationship to the access point, it also takes into account sources of RF interference and chooses an antenna pattern that both concentrates the signal towards the client and also helps ignore sources of RF interference. And because of that, in dense RF environments where you're putting a lot of access points, such as in hotels or apartments and condos, we have the ability to achieve greater than 100% airtime efficiency, basically allowing you to exceed the theoretical maximum speeds that you can offer across these access points because the smart antenna is able to reduce that co-channel interference and allow multiple devices to use the same channel at the same time without interfering with each other. The nice thing about smart antenna technology is it works with any client device out there. It doesn't require anything special on them. It also works with mobile users. Like beamforming technology really only works when the client device is stationary. Smart antenna works in all situations. So when it comes to our access points, we group them into 4 categories. I don't personally like the naming, but I wasn't asked. So this is what we have here. We have 4 categories. At the low end, we have what they call the simplicity line. These are products that are aimed at the prosumer home user space. They aren't really aimed at the business space. These products come with a 2-year warranty on them, and they may be missing some of the more advanced features, such as captive portal or load balancing on the access points, because they're really designed for those small home or Soho type deployments. And those models will all start with the letters NWA and then 2 digits after that. So currently we have an NWA 50 series and an NWA 90 series. The first step to what I'm going to call true business class access points is our NWA series that starts with 1 or 2, and then there are 3 digits. So the NWA 100 series, the NWA 200 series. And those are going to be what we call the flexibility products. So these products are Nebula Flex access points. They come with a lifetime warranty, and they have all of the true business class features you would expect to find in an access point, such as captive portal, such as load balancing, etc. Then going up from that is our Ultimate series. So the Ultimate series are going to be access points that start with the letter W, WAX, WAC, WBE. And then we've got some series numbers after that. We've got a 3000 series, a 500, 5000 series, 600, 6000 series. And in general, these products are always going to be what our Nebula Flex Pro devices. So these will come with 1 year Pro Pack bundled with them. These will come with support for local controller management. And then generally, these also include some of those more advanced antenna technologies. So if you're looking for a dual optimized access point, it will be part of the W series. If you're looking for smart antenna, it will be part of the W series. So I'm going to just really quickly sort of hit some of the highlights here on some of the different models. So here's our Simplicity series here. Um, and I just wanted to talk really quickly here about the NWA 55AXE. This is a very affordable, I want to say the street price is $129 outdoor access point. It has 2 external antennas that can be removed and replaced with directional antennas should you want to. But this is probably the access point you want to go with if you're looking for an inexpensive way to bridge 2 different buildings together. So if you've got the main office and you've got a second warehouse or utility building behind and you want to bring the internet connection together, you buy 2 of these, slap these on the outside of your buildings, and you can create a point-to-point bridge super easy, or a point-to-point multi-bridge super easy with these. And the primary difference between the 90 series and the 50 series just has to do with the software features that are available on them. So NWA 50 is the most bare bones access point, and then the 90 adds some of the business class features, but not all of them to the product. So right now, when it comes to the NWA 100 series or 100, 200 series, we've got 2 access points available, and we will have more coming later this year. So on the Wi-Fi 6E side of things, we have the NWA 220AX-6E. So it's a dual radio 6E product. So one radio is dedicated to 2.4. The other radio can operate as either 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz. So it's a good way if you're looking to sort of, your clients don't have any 6 gigahertz users today. So you use it as a 5 gigahertz. And then in the future, when 6 gigahertz becomes more widespread, you flip a switch and it now supports 6 gigahertz instead. And then the NWA 130BE, this is $180 tri-radio Wi-Fi 7 access points, supporting speeds up to BE 11,000. It's got a 2.5 gig uplink port and an additional 2.5 gig pass-through port. Jumping up to our W series here, we have the WAX 300H. So this is an access point specifically designed for hospitality. It's designed to be mounted directly to a junction box or a rectangular box of some sort on your wall. You have 1 Ethernet cable coming in, providing PoE and data. And then you've got 4 Ethernet ports coming out of this that you can run to other devices in the room. One of those ports provides PoE pass-through. So you have your PoE switch that powers this up. This can then power up, say, an IP phone that's in the room. And then you've got 3 additional Ethernet ports that you can run to like an IPTV. So it's specifically designed for that hospitality space, especially for today's more modern deployments where they're doing 1 access point per room. And then the more traditional form factors here, we have the WAX 510D, which is our Wi-Fi 6 access point with dual optimized antennas, and the WBE 530, which is basically the NWA 130, but it's Nebula Flex Pro instead of Nebula Flex. So if you need Nebula Flex Pro, or if you need local controller support and Wi-Fi 7, that's the model you're looking for. And then on the higher end here of the W series, we have our WAX 610D, WAX 630S. So these are basically the same access point, with the difference being the antenna stuff. So the 610D, the D implies dual optimized antennas. The 630S, the S implies smart antenna. So if you're looking for an affordable smart antenna solution, the WAX 630S is the access point to look at. If you're just looking for dual optimized, the 610D is for you. Then our highest performance Wi-Fi 6 access point is our WAX 650S. It's got smart antenna. It's got a third dedicated radio for scanning DFS channels, and it's got Bluetooth BLE support built in. And then our heavy duty outdoor access point is the WAX 655E. It does not come with antennas. You have to buy those separately, but this is a heavy duty outdoor access point that's designed to basically handle anything you can throw at it, including temperatures down to -40. And then when it comes to higher end smart antenna, we have the Wi-Fi 6E WAX 640S. So this is our only tri-radio 6E access point. And then the WBE 660S. So this is a sub $500 Wi-Fi 7 BE 22,000 rated speed access point, 3 radios, 10 gig uplink port, etc. So when it comes to outdoors, as I talked about a minute ago, we have that NWA 55AXE. We have the heavy duty WAX 655E. We also have this guy here, which fits most of our Wi-Fi 6 access points. And that's our outdoor enclosure. It basically allows you to take an indoor access point, put it in this enclosure, and mount the access point outdoors. So it's a low-cost solution when you need to provide some basic coverage outdoors. So Donald is asking, are these the only Wi-Fi 7 radio units? So yes, right now we have 3 Wi-Fi 7 access points, the NWA 130BE, the WBE 530, and the WBE 660S. So those are the 3 that we currently have. There will hopefully be some more models here towards the end of the year. But yes, for right now, it's just those 3 models that we covered on the previous slides. So I do want to talk just really briefly about what Wi-Fi 7 adds to the game, since it's still a relatively new technology, and we still have a lot of customers that have not yet made the jump to Wi-Fi 7, in large part because a lot of the very few client devices yet support Wi-Fi 7. But basically, it offers faster speeds. In theory, speeds up to 46 gigabits per second are theoretically capable. We don't offer any access points that support it, but again, we offer up to 22 gigabits with what we have today. It increased the QAM from 1024-bit QAM to 4096-bit QAM, which gives us about a 20% data rate increase. We've doubled the bandwidth using that 6 gigahertz radio to provide channels that are 320 megahertz in size. So your clients are using a bigger chunk of spectrum to send more data. And then another cool feature that we just enabled in Nebula just last month is called MLO, the ability for client devices to connect to multiple radios in the same access point at the same time. At the moment, I am not aware of any clients that are available or planned that support more than 2 links. So that is what we support currently in our device. So it would allow a client device to say simultaneously connect to 2.4 and 6, or simultaneously connect to 5 and 6 gigahertz. And that unlocks some new features for us. One, you can increase speed by spreading your data across the 2 radios and aggregating them together. The other thing you can do is you can lower your latency. With Wi-Fi, there's a lot of packet drops because you're using unlicensed RF spectrum. And so what you do is you send the same data over 2 different radios. And in theory, some packets will be lost on one radio, some packets will be lost on the other radio, but those lost packets will carry through on the other radio. So you reduce the number of retransmits you need to do, thus lowering the overall latency of your Wi-Fi connection. So the main areas where Wi-Fi 7 tends to shine is high density deployments, areas where you've either got a lot of access points or a lot of users. And that's because with 6 gigahertz, you've got a huge amount of non-overlapping spectrum available. So you reduce that interference between devices and access points. And then also with 3 radios to distribute your clients across, you can more easily load balance those users across those three radios for better performance overall. Another area where we see benefits for Wi-Fi 7 and 6 gigahertz radios in particular is when it comes to meshing your access points. You might remember way back in the day, for those of you that have been around a long time like me, when Ruckus first tried to make the move into enterprise wireless, that was their pitch. Well, you can use our smart antenna and you can easily do mesh deployments in a business environment. But of course, what we all found is mesh doesn't really work in a business class environment like it does in the home. And so with 6 gigahertz now and tri-radio access points, we're at the point where I think it makes sense to start using mesh in business environments. You reduce those interference issues and the crowding issues that you generally had when it came to business mesh. You reduce the latency. It starts making it much more of a viable solution. Okay, so that's it for wireless access points. I'm moving on to switches. So let's start talking about our switches. So one thing to point out here is when it comes to some of these different technologies, we have different grades of Ethernet cable that are already deployed, and that puts some limits on what we can do. So just in general, Cat5e can support multi-gig up to 5 gigabits per second. Cat6 cables can support up to 10 gigs, but on shorter runs. So generally, you don't want to go much more beyond 50 meters when you're doing 10 gigs over Cat6 cables. And then Cat6a cables can provide full 10 gig up to the full 100-meter limit of Ethernet. Another thing we want to talk about here is when it comes to PoE, there are now 3 different standards that are out there. The original standard was 15.4 watts. This was called 802.3 AF. So it can provide up to 15.4 watts of power per port. Quite a while ago, most products have moved to PoE Plus or 802.3 AT, and that provides 30 watts of power per port. And now with the proliferation of these really fast Wi-Fi 7 access points, you're seeing a lot of demand for what's called PoE++ or 802.3 BT. And it can provide up to 60 watts of power per port. So some of the higher end Wi-Fi 7 access points are going to require this, as well as some of your 4K pan tilt zoom IP cameras are going to require this as well. So when it comes to our switches, we've got a lot of switches, too many switches to go over. But I do want to give you some naming conventions. So when you're looking at all those switches at our price file that we send out, or when you're looking at the distribution listing, by looking at the model name, you can tell a lot about what that switch offers. So all of our switches start with a prefix. So if it starts with ES, that is telling you it's a fast Ethernet switch. Obviously, we aren't selling a lot of those anymore. RG is for ruggedized switches. So those will all be 1 gig switches. We don't sell a lot of those. We just started offering those in North America recently. GS are our gigabit switches. So anything that starts with GS, that's telling you that all ports on that switch support 1 gig connections. MG are our multi-gig switches. So if you see MG, it tells you all ports are multi-gig ports. If you see XGS, the GS means 1 gig ports. The X means 10 gig ports. So an XGS switch is going to be mostly 1 gig ports, but then it will have 10 gig uplink ports, either copper, SFP, or both. If you see XMG, same thing. The MG stands for multi-gig, the X for 10 gig. So on those switches, all of the ports or most of the ports will be multi-gig, either 2.5 or 5 gig ports, and then there will be 10 gig uplinks. And if it's XS, that's telling you that all of the ports on that switch are 10 gig ports. And then we will have a suffix usually on the end of many of our switches. So that's usually referring to the PoE capabilities. If it ends in HP, that's telling you it's PoE plus or PoE plus plus, with what we would call a standard PoE power budget. We also have the EP series of switches. So these are eco power. So HP is high power, EP is eco power, and those will still support either PoE plus or PoE plus plus. But the overall budget of the switch is reduced to lower the cost. And then FP is full power. So basically on those switches, they will be able to provide the maximum amount of PoE power per port across all of the ports on that switch. And then if you see a switch that ends in F, that's telling you that all ports on that switch are fiber ports. I'm going to skip through this. We've got different, accessories out there. You do not have to buy our SFP modules, but it's probably best just for compatibility and for any sort of troubleshooting support. So we do offer 1 gig, 10 gig SFP ports, as well as direct attached cables for those switches that support true hardware stacking. So some of the features that are available on the bulk of our switches includes the ability to do vendor-based VLAN. So basically, if you know the first few digits of the MAC address of a certain type of equipment you're using, so for instance, you're deploying IP phones, they all come from a certain vendor, you simply add that vendor's first few digits to their MAC address, and the switch will see that and automatically add any device you plug in to a VLAN based on that. So instead of having to go in and manually configure it on a port by port basis, you plug in that IP phone and it automatically gets put on the voice VLAN. To unplug that thing and plug something else in, that automatically gets removed from the voice, that port gets removed from the voice VLAN and it just gets put on the standard VLAN. Take that IP phone, plug it into a different port elsewhere, automatically gets put into the voice VLAN. Our GS1350 series switches have the ability to ping connected devices, and after they stop responding, we can automatically power cycle those devices to reboot them. Almost all of our PoE switches support intelligent PoE, which basically allows you to free up your PoE budget so you can put more devices on the same switch than you otherwise would be able to. Then we've got some machine learning in Nebula, things like that. So when you're in Nebula and you look at what's going on, you can see here, we show you all of the ports on your switches, and we make it really easy to see what's going on those ports. We show you what speed the connected device is based on the color. The letter P there indicates whether or not PoE power is being provided to that device. Gray ports have nothing plugged into them. We've got the ability to do some troubleshooting here. You can see we can run pings. We can look at switch tables. We can power cycle certain ports all through that interface. And then we can also look at utilization over time on a graph basis there for you. So a lot of cool stuff. You can virtually stack switches, allowing you to configure ports across multiple switches simultaneously. So our switch product lines are split into 3 categories. At least 3 categories that we're going to talk about today. We also have what I'm going to call more consumer desktop series switches. So those aren't on here. We're not going to talk about them, but we do offer those for you. So when it comes to business class switches, we have these 3 categories: simplicity, flexibility, and ultimate. So simplicity are going to be our our 1915 series. So these switches are Nebula Flex, so they can be managed in the Nebula cloud. So these will be our cheapest switches that support Nebula management. And they offer a basic web GUI if you're using these in standalone. The step up from these is our flexibility series. So these are our layer 2 switches here, layer 2 plus. These offer the core layer 2 features that most people would expect. So these are our 1920 and 1930 series, and also the 1350 series. So why is the 1350 named differently than the rest? The 1350 is our switch series that's aimed at those of you that are doing IP deployments, IP cameras. So it's got extra features that were specifically added for IP cameras, such as I mentioned before, the ability to monitor connected devices and automatically reboot them should they go offline. And then we've got our Ultimate series. These are our true layer 2 plus and layer 3 switches. These offer Nebula management, standard web GUI direct management, and also offer support for SSH management. In addition to our switches, we do offer multi-gig PoE injectors, right? So a lot of our new faster access points have either 2.5 or 5 gig ports for the uplink. So we offer a 2.5 gig uplink PoE injector that provides up to 30 watts of power, and then PoE injectors that offer up to 60 watts of power. So we've been selling a lot of those 60-watt PoE injectors to help power up our higher-end access points. For those of you that don't want to upgrade your entire switch network to support those higher speeds, you know, you only have 5 or 6 of these new access points, just buy some of these PoE injectors and add them in line. So just real briefly here, here's our 1950 series, the GS 1915s. So again, GS tells you all of the ports on these are 1 gig. And as you can see, we've got both sort of a desktop and rack mount versions of these. The XMG 1915, so on these, XMG tells you multi-gig ports with 10 gig uplinks. That 1350 series I was talking about that's specifically aimed at those of you doing IP cameras. So in addition to what I talked about before, monitoring and rebooting devices, it can also provide continuous PoE power. So if the switch needs to be rebooted, firmware needs to be updated, the connected devices don't go offline as far as power goes. As soon as the switch is back up, they're passing data again. And they can provide connections up to 250 meters instead of the standard 100 meters of most Ethernet devices. Jumping up from there, the 1930 series, we have the XMG 1930s. These have become really popular, so that's why I wanted to highlight them here. So again, 2.5 gig ports, and then 10 gig uplinks, and many of these with PoE provide PoE++ to power those higher end access points and cameras. So that's it as far as the switch overview goes. I'm now jumping over to our security products. So these are our SCR, USG Flex, and ATP series of products. So basically, we've got products for all different levels of security and network speed that you might need. So most of our competition in this space, in addition to making the hardware, in addition to making the software, they also try to provide the what's the word I'm looking for here? They provide the signature files to help recognize antivirus, content filtering threats, things like that. So that's where we're a little bit different. We make the hardware, we make the software, but we partner with industry leaders to provide those signatures and to provide those extra features rather than try to do it all in-house. Because let's be honest, nobody is going to be an expert in all of these different fields. So we focus on the hardware and software, and we partner with people to provide the additional UTM or threat management services. So we use Siren when it comes to email security. We use Bitdefender and Trellix when it comes to antivirus, anti-malware. We use Norton when it comes to sandboxing. We use Amazon Web Services when it comes to hosting our cloud-based stuff. We use WebRoot, etc. So our security appliances, our USG and Zywall and ATP have been ICSA certified now for over 22 years in a row. So ICSA is an industry group that provides testing and validation of security appliances. So some of the features that we offer, these are additional optional licenses that are available in most of our USG Flex products. Content filtering, the ability to filter out websites based on category, even those that are SSL encrypted. Secure Wi-Fi, this is the ability for us to take a managed access point and turn it into a basically cloud managed VPN appliance that you can give to your remote users. And because it's an access point, it's designed to work behind their existing router. You don't have to worry about double natting and things like that. We have our Connect and Protect licenses. This is a UTM type license that's available on our access points. And then now we have our Gold Security Bundle. So this is something that originally started on the ATP series and is now available in the USG Flex series. So this includes advanced threat protection, a full UTM suite, and Nebula Cloud Management all bundled into one license. So let's talk a little bit about AI-powered cloud security. So the traditional way of doing UTM or firewall-based security was to use signature files. So basically a new threat comes out, security researchers identify it, they research it, they create signatures to identify it, and then those signatures are pushed out. That's the way it's been done for decades. And then starting a few years ago, there was a new thing called advanced threat protection. And that used basically sandboxing and machine learning and simulations to more quickly and readily identify threats identify those threats, and push out the ability for security appliances to identify them. So basically, it allows you to very quickly identify and react to zero-day exploits much quicker than you would traditionally would. So originally, we had two sets of hardware. We had the USG Flex, which was your traditional UTM, and we had the ATP series, which was this advanced threat protection. So we are in the process currently of phasing out those ATP models. And what we have done is we have added a software key that basically allows you to convert your traditional USG Flex, traditional UTM security, and convert that into what's essentially advanced threat protection security using that same hardware. So now you've got basically one model of hardware to buy, and you can choose which state way of doing security you want to use. So this is that secure Wi-Fi functionality. Basically, it allows you to create a site-to-site VPN for your remote users. So you've got your USG Flex set up at your main company office. And rather than installing and configuring software in each user's remote device, you simply give them an access point, they take it home, plug it in, and it broadcasts a special SSID. So the user connects to that SSID, and basically all traffic is then routed through a VPN tunnel back to the corporate office to give you access to the corporate office resources. So the nice thing is it's easier to configure, it's easier for your end users to set up, but it still provides good security. So in order to connect to that SSID, they do need a username and password. And on top of that, you can also add two-factor authentication before they are able to connect and pass traffic back to the corporate network. In addition here, we make it really easy to monitor threats, generate reports that you can provide your users, etc., through something called SecuReporter. So that is a cloud-hosted software package designed specifically to analyze security product logs and generate visual reports to make it easy for you to see what's going on and make it easy for you to explain to your customers what's been going on their networks. And with Nebula, we make it really easy to centrally provision your VPN connections from site to site, manage your users, etc. So when it comes to the product lines, again, we've sort of split these up into different categories here for you. On the entry level, so your home user, your Soho user, we have the Effortless series. So this is the SCR50 and the new USG Lite 60 products. They provide license-free UTM Lite functionality for those home or remote users. The step up for that for like a small office, like a doctor's office or something like that, we've got the USG Flex 50 series, which falls under simplicity. And then the flexibility series are our USG Flex. And then now in the Ultimate series, we have that ATP series, which again is going away. And we have our new USG Flex H series. So the USG Flex H series is going to eventually replace the USG Flex as well. It's a new hardware platform. It is a new software platform for our security appliances that provides much improved throughput performance of the UTM services. The trade-off, at least for the moment, is a number of features are still missing in the USG Flex H series. So if you need high performance, you go with the H series. If you don't need high performance today, you go with the standard USG Flex. But by the end of the year, basically all functionality that's found in the USG Flex should be fully ported over to the new USG Flex H platform. And at that time, we'll probably start phasing out the USG Flex for the H series. But at the moment, the Flex is still available, the Flex H's are available, and some models of the ATP are still available for you. So I just wanted to touch really quick on the SCR50 and USG Lite 60 because these are relatively new products and in a new market segment where traditionally we haven't competed. So the idea here is to make it super easy for people to get up and running in just a couple of minutes with their security gateway here. It's got built-in subscription-free security, including ransomware protection, built-in Wi-Fi 6E access point, tri-radio, auto VPN functionality for being able to connect site to site or back to a corporate office. And we do have an optional license, which unlocks some additional security features. And then we've got the USG Lite 60AX. So it's a little bit better performing, but one thing I do want to point out is the Wi-Fi is different. So the 50 comes with Wi-Fi 6 tri-radio or 6E tri-radio. This comes with Wi-Fi 6 dual radio, but it supports mesh. So the 50 doesn't support mesh, the 660 does. So we have a number of different partners right now that are analyzing actually using these. These are Nebula managed. So they're using these as cloud managed potential CPE products for MXU deployments. So this would be the main device. And then if they need additional coverage, like larger condos, you can then use our mesh access points to extend the coverage without needing to run Ethernet back to the box itself. And this does have dual multi-gig 2.5 gig ports on it. And then the USG Flex here, this is our standard series. The ATP series is going away. I'm not going to dig through all of these. And then the H series I've already talked about before. This is going to be our new hardware platform and new software platform. It is available today, but some of the features still aren't ready yet. This is just showing here a comparison of the different performances here. So you can see just when it comes to SPI firewall, the USG Flex 700H can support throughput of 15 gigabits per second. Software is basically the same across all of these. The difference is just how fast the hardware is and what the port configuration is on the devices themselves. And with that, guys, we end today's webinar. I know it's been a long one. I know I've gone through a lot of technical stuff and I've done it really quick. Thank you for sitting through all of that. If you have any questions, send them in now using that question and answer part of the interface. There are none waiting for me, so while I wait, I just wanted to highlight here for you. Most of our webinars are recorded. You can find them on YouTube within generally a day after the presentation under Zyxel America channel. Because we're a global company, each region has their own channel. So for the US, it's Zyxel America channel. In addition to webinars, we have video case studies, we have best practices videos, we have commercials. So check that out. And of course, feel free to link up to us on LinkedIn. Again, there's a lot of different Zyxels showing. So for us, it's Zyxel US channel is what we're called on LinkedIn. And with that, guys, we are done. I will stick around for just another minute. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. If you do think of something later, you can email me directly. My email's up there on the screen, or just pass it through to your salesperson, Jacob, Andy, or David. They can either answer the question or put you in touch with the right person to get an answer for the question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming through, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming out today.